Hi, welcome to Educational Research with Dr. Henkel. We are going to go over Chapter 7 out of your Creswell book, and we will do it by reviewing the PowerPoint. But before we do, let's go ahead and open up in a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for all the many blessings you've given us. Thank you so much for the ability to learn and to be able to use this knowledge to do what you would have for us to do, Lord. And I pray that my students will gain knowledge that you'll be able to use to further your will for them in their lives, Lord, and to help reach others and to benefit others that you would see fit. And I thank you so much for their dedication and their professionalism with their work, Lord. They're doing so well. And I pray that you will continue to guide them as they seek this time in their life to better equip them with resources and tools and a bank of knowledge that will ultimately be used for your glory, Lord. And I just thank you so much for us to be able to be a part of that. And I humbly and very graciously say thank you. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, guys. So we're going to go ahead and go into Chapter 7. So here it is in your Moodle course. And I have it pulled up here already. So I'll go ahead and get the slideshow going. And it's over collecting qualitative data. Here's the learning objectives. And there's going to be 5 process steps when you collect qualitative data. First step is you identify participants and sites. Second step is to gain access to individuals and those sites. Third step is you identify what types of info you will need to answer your research questions. Remember, research questions, that is what's guiding your study. Fourth step, design protocols or instruments for collecting and recording information. In qualitative research, you will not use somebody else's instrument, you make it your own. So it's different than quantitative. And then lastly, you administer the data collection. So here's some more details on those 5 steps. So remember the first step, qualitative research, identify participants and sites through purposeful sampling. And we're going to learn the ins and outs of purposeful sampling. The second thing is that qualitative studies are usually conducted at the research site. So you're going to have to gain permission for that. Qualitative studies rely on general interviews or observations, not others' instruments. And we just mentioned that. Qualitative researchers record info through self-designed protocols. And lastly, qualitative studies require sensitivity to challenges and ethical issues. So that's something you also have to keep in mind. And next, we're going to look at the different purposeful sampling approaches whenever you're going to go and select your participants and your location. So first, your intent is not to generalize to a population. That's what we did for quantitative studies. But you're going to develop an in-depth exploration of a central phenomenon. Quantitative focus is on probability, okay? While qualitative focus is the best understanding, because it gains an understanding from people or sites that can best help you understand the central phenomenon. And remember, when I say that quantitative focus is probability or random sampling, okay? Remember, random sampling is when you select individuals and then you generalize from those individuals to a population. So qualitative is opposite. It's not random. You have purposeful sampling. You're looking and you are choosing your participants and your site. Okay, so now we have The differences between probability sampling, which is your quantitative sampling, and your purposeful sampling, which is for qualitative, okay? So random sampling, quantitative sampling, they select a representative of individuals to generalize from the sample to a overall population. You can make claims about that population, and you're also going to test theories, or you could, that explain that population. But with qualitative, you select people and sites who can best help you understand your phenomenon, okay? And you're going to develop detailed understanding, not generalizations. That might be useful info that might help people learn about the phenomenon and might give a voice to the silenced population. Okay, now on page 206, it talks about purposeful sampling used in qualitative sampling. And here's just a little bit more about that purposeful sampling. It's intentionally select individuals and sites to understand the central phenomenon. You choose participants and sites that are information rich, and you want to identify sampling strategy based on intent. So here's a nice little flowchart, and it's the types of purposeful sampling. So at the top, you could write, when does sampling occur? And then on the left, it says before data collection, and on the right, it says after data collection. So just depending on how you would design your study, it just depends on which way you would flow. So what is the intent? If you're doing it before data collection, what's the intent? Are you trying to develop many perspectives? Well, then you're going to want to do a maximal variation sampling. Or do you want to describe what is typical to those unfamiliar with the case? Then you'll do a typical sampling. And so this is just a good little diagram for you to look at whenever you're trying to figure out what type of sampling, purposeful sampling, should I do? Well, this is a great way for you to do that. And then we're going to go and just give definitions for each of those in green boxes. Those are the different types of purposeful sampling, and we're going to kind of just break each one down. And your book goes into further detail. So as you learn and you read, just write down notes, and that's the best way to approach this. So the different purposeful sampling approaches for selecting participants and sites. The first one is maximum variation sampling. Okay, this samples cases different on characteristics and traits. And these different characteristics could be like different age groups, racial backgrounds, or different sites. And the next one is extreme case sampling. Okay, now this one is when you're going to study an outlier, and when it has like an extreme characteristic, such as maybe like a troublesome teen. Maybe it's cited by others. It's noticeable for success or for failure. Next, you have typical sampling. And a previous one for this one would be like, an example would be for extreme case. It could be like a troubled teen. Okay, so when you go back to your typical sampling, you're going to study a person or site that is typical. Okay, you're concerned with what's normal. You might find this based on a demographic data or survey data. And so you'll just kind of find the norm, and that's who you're going to sample. Examples would be typical faculty members with long experience. Theory or concept sampling. So here's another one of your sampling techniques you could do. If you're doing theory, you're going to help to generate or discover a theory. Or you're going to discover concepts within a theory. And it's based on a concept of theory expected to emerge. An example would be selecting sites to generate a theory of student attitudes toward online education. Okay, so homogeneous sampling, an example would be like all parents in a school parenting program. They all have the same defined characteristic, and they possess that similar trait. Okay, so they're all parents in that program, that school parenting program. Critical sampling. Here is if you're going to be studying, an example would be like teenage violence in schools when they experienced a gun incident. So individuals or sites represent central phenomenon dramatically, exceptional case to learn about central phenomenon. Okay. And so all of these are just different types of techniques that you could use if you were doing a qualitative study. And then once you choose one, you would go in and read and learn more about it so that you would have a better understanding of what it is. And that way you can form your research questions and so forth. So now we have something called opportunistic sampling. This is they're going to take advantage of unfolding events. Sample emerges through the research. Example would be pregnancy of individual leads to unique ability to understand central phenomenon. So maybe it just kind of unfolded. You didn't really expect it. So then you could have this purposeful sampling for those individuals. Now, snowball sampling, just like in quantitative, we also have it here in qualitative. It proceeds after the study begins. So maybe you've researched, and then you might not know the best people to study, but then you can ask the participants if they know and have any recommendations of others that you could sample and investigate from and learn from. So that's called snowball sampling. So you just picture that snowball rolling down the mountain, getting bigger and bigger. And so that's the same thing that you would do to get your samples for your study, for your people. Okay, so another example of purposeful sampling is confirming and disconfirming sampling. So if you're going to follow up on specific cases to test or explore findings further, you could do that. You can verify accuracy of findings. So, for example, you want to learn that department chairs act as mentors, and you confirm the role by sampling those identified as good mentors. Size or number of research sites. So now when you're trying to find research sites or a sample size, you're going to start with small for in-depth perspectives. It's just a few individuals, a few cases. You could have, up to 30 to 40 in some situations. So collecting and analyzing qualitative data takes time. So also know that with the addition of each individual or site to your study, it's going to lengthen the amount of time that it takes to conduct your study. So it is a lengthy process. So you have to keep that in mind, but sometimes it's necessary to be able to get better data. Now, on page 210, it goes over what the IRB or your institutional review board will need to review when they seek approval, when you seek approval to conduct your study. Okay, so you would have to get permission from the IRB. First, you can get permission from the gatekeeper at the research site. So the gatekeepers are those individuals who can give you access to your site. They will require written information about your project, and we'll go into that in more detail. Now, when you're getting that approval, you need to determine whether reviewers are family with qualitative inquiry. You're going to develop detailed description of the procedures for them, detail how you will protect their anonymity and keep it anonymous. And you're going to discuss the need to respect the site and minimize disruption. So this should be familiar. I wrote that down. It says determine whether reviewers are familiar with qualitative inquiry. So you need to look and see, are they familiar with it? Most of them will be. It's getting very popular. So I guess some could not. Really, with my experience, people are familiar with qualitative study, and it's been around, and so I don't know if I agree with that wholeheartedly there. So also going off, still looking for approval, you want to describe the opportunities that are available that you are able to give. Okay, so shine light on it. What's the positive aspects of it? So you're also going to have to give detailed descriptions of the procedures that you're going to be doing. They need to know exactly what it is that you're going to be doing. And so you're going to write all this up, and then you submit this to the IRB. And so you also want to acknowledge that you may adopt participant beliefs. Okay. Specify power imbalances, detailed time required at the site, and provide the list of the specific questions that you are going to be using, because they need to know that, because that's what they're going to have to ultimately approve. Okay, so gatekeeper. So this is what you will inform them of. Why their site was chosen. Why'd you pick their site? Okay, what time and resources are needed? What will be accomplished there? Okay, so these are just all the different things that you need to specifically kind of let them know what you're going to be doing. And then let them know how you're going to use the results and how are you going to report them. Are they going to gain anything from this? Like, why should we let you do this? And so you just kind of tell them, this is going to be good. So what types of qualitative data will you collect? So now let's say you got permission from your IRB and you're ready to go. So what types of data could you collect? So maybe you figured out what type of sampling technique that you want to do, your purposeful sampling. Now there's 4 different types of data. You can either do observations, you can do interviews and questionnaires, and remember you're going to make your own. You could look at documents or audio-visual materials. And then we're going to go and quickly go over those, but your book will go over those in more depth. So this is a nice little table. It's on page 214 in your textbook, and it goes over the different types of qualitative data collection. So the 4 we just discussed. So observations. Those could be like your field notes or drawings. Unstructured, okay, so let's define that. It's unstructured text data and pictures taken during observations by the researcher. Next, interviews and questionnaires. Okay, so what's that? That's transcriptions of open-ended interviews or open-ended questions on questionnaires. And one of your assignments this week, you're going to actually do that. You're going to interview somebody and you are going to have to transcribe their responses and you're going to record it so that you can do that later. Now, let's define that. It's unstructured text data obtained from transcribing audio recordings of interviews by transcribing open-ended responses to questions on questionnaires. Now, you have documents. So that could be like notes that you write down about a document that you have on hand and they're scanned. And so this could be public notes for meetings or private notes like journals that you can gain access to. Finally is audio visual materials. So those are like pictures, photographs, video recordings, objects, and sounds. These materials consist of images or sounds of people or places recorded by the researcher or someone else. Okay, so observation. So you have observational roles. An observation is the process of gathering first-hand information by observing people and places at a research site. So what are the roles? Well, a participant observer is an observational role adopted by researchers when they take part in activities in the setting they observe. So you're actually participating. Now, there's also a non-participant, so that's just the opposite. You're not going to be participating. You're just solely observing. Okay, so and these roles can be changed within your study as you conduct it. So now the process of observing, again, is you're going to select a site. They'll help you understand that central phenomenon of your study. After you've gained permissions from the gatekeeper to get access to the site, and you also have gained permission from the IRB. So you get into the site slowly by looking around. You get a general sense of the site and you take limited notes, at least initially. You're going to identify who or what to observe, when to observe, and how long to observe. Determine initially your role as an observer. So I like how your book just breaks it down step by step of what you would need to do and what that looks like. Okay, so when you conduct multiple observations over time, you obtain the best understanding of the site and the individuals. Okay, so you don't want to just come in and pop in and take some notes and then that's it. No, you want to come in multiple times and it's going to give you the best results. So you're going to design some means for recording notes during your observations. So you'll come prepared. Consider what information you're going to record. Do you want descriptive field notes, like of events, activities, and people, or reflective field notes that record personal reflections that relate to their insights, hunches, or broad themes that emerge? And you're going to remain unobtrusive, so just kind of stay in the background. And when you're done, you slowly just withdraw from the site. You don't make a scene. Okay? I think y'all understand this. This is pretty cut and dry. So here's like an example of an observational checklist that you can use. And you just check them off. So did you gain permission to study the site? Do you know your role as the observer? Okay, will you make multiple observations over time? So these are just some questions that you can ask as you're developing your observational checklist. Okay. So next, we're going to move into interviews, and you'll utilize this whenever you do your assignment this week. It's types of interviews, and we're going to go over open-ended questions on questionnaires as well. So there's different types. You can have a one-on-one interview, a focus group interview, phone, web-based, video, email. You're going to have general open-ended questions. Okay, that's really, really important, is your open-ended questions. I would highlight that are asked to allow the participant to create options for responding and voice their experiences and perspectives. So it's recorded and then transcribed for analysis. That means you're just going to listen to the recording and you're going to type out or write out word for word verbatim of what that was said in that interview. Okay? So when you're conducting the interview, you need to identify the interviewees. Who are you interviewing? Determine what type of interview you're going to do, focus group, one-on-one. You record it, you take notes, it's in a quiet place, and you also need to make sure that you have consent from the interviewee to participate in the study. You have to gain their consent. Okay, so during the interview, you'll have an interview plan that you use during your interview protocol, but you can be flexible. You can go off of it a little bit. That's okay. Now, whenever you're interviewing somebody and they aren't giving you enough information, they're maybe answering too short, you can come with probes that can help get more information out of your interviewee. So include that in your protocol. So those possible probes that you could use to get an elaboration and clarification. So, and always be courteous and professional when the interview is over. Okay, so like here's an example of a type of probe that was used for a qualitative interview. It says, what has happened since the event that you have been involved in? And you're just going to assume that the interviewer will say not much or simply does not answer. Okay, well then you're going to have in your protocol, your interview protocol, these probes. Comments to other students. Tell me about discussions you had with other students. Or maybe the role of parents. Did you talk with your parents? Did you talk with any media personnel? So it just depends who you're talking to and what you could say. And then examples could be like, tell me more. Could you explain your response more? I need more detail. What does not much mean? Okay. So those are important to have in your interview protocol. So here's a checklist for interviewing, just to go over a few of them. Who will participate in your interviews? Do you know that? What types of interviews are best to conduct? Is the setting for your interview comfortable and quiet? So you'll just go over these and just make sure that you have gotten all of these taken care of and that you are ready to conduct your interview. Now, another way to get data, qualitative data, is by looking at documents. So this is our third way of getting data. So you identify different types of documents that might be useful, so you need to think about that. And then you might get private or public ones. You have to get permission before you use those documents. And you need to provide specific instructions if you ask participants to keep a journal. Okay, so that could also be um, considered documentation. So you examine for accuracy, completeness, and usefulness, and scan the documents when possible. Then you have audio-visual materials. Now for those, that's another document, okay? And images or sounds to help understand the central phenomenon. Examples would be photographs, video records, digital images, paintings, and drawings. These are a little bit more difficult to analyze. It's not cut and dry. Um, So you need to determine what material can provide evidence to address your research questions. So make sure it's always going to tie back and answer those questions. Determine what visual material is available and obtain permission to use it. And then you also check for the accuracy of it, and you collect that data and organize it. So, using protocols. What protocols will be used to record data? So first you're going to have an interview protocol if you're conducting an interview, and we kind of touched on that. So these are just going to be instructions for the process of the interview, the questions to be asked, possible probes associated with each question, so how you can get them to elaborate if they're not giving you detailed answers. And you're going to also provide space to take notes on responses from the interviewee. Okay. Now, the header, this is just essential information about the interview, such as the purpose, the reminder to obtain consent, and record. Open-ended questions. You can have like icebreaker questions, questions that address major research questions, probes that clarify and elaborate. Include space between each question so that you can write down responses. And you can also, on your protocol, have closing comments thanking the participant. So you're going to come well prepared. You're going to know exactly what to say, how to get more answers if you need them, and then also how to end it kindly and thank them for participating. Okay, so this is an example of an interview protocol of how you would fill it out. So you would have your project, University Reaction to a Gunman Incident. So that's like the title of the project. You're going to put what time, the date, the place, who you're going to interview, who's interviewing, what position, questions, and then so you just have it all lined out and filled out. Okay. So, what procedures will be used to record data? There's an observational protocol. So when you're observing, this is the type of protocol you need to go for whenever you're doing that with observations. You use this for taking field notes during an observation. In the header, record information about, the time and place, just like you did for your interview protocol. And you divide the rest of the protocol into two columns. The left column, you're going to record descriptive notes about the activities at the site. And on the right, you record reflective notes about themes, quotes, or personal experiences. So left is more descriptive notes about what's going on, and then right is more, reflections of what you're seeing, what's quoted, what's going on, what themes are emerging, okay? So you can include a sketch of the site also as well on this observational protocol. So I like how they have it all organized for you on what to do. Now, what field and ethical issues need to be anticipated? So there could come, some issues that pop up. Um, Maybe you're going to have trouble building rapport with participants. Okay, so that might be something. Your observational role, how is that going to look? Obtain permission to use the document. So that might be an issue that you come across. Um, you need to limit the initial collection to 1 or 2 observations when you're doing observations. Okay, time is needed to establish a substantial database. So I'm sorry. So if you're only able to go 1 or 2 times, that's not going to be enough time to gather enough data. So that could be a field issue. So you need to think about that. Am I going to have enough time to collect my data? Okay, because with qualitative studies, you do need to see like the trend over one time. You don't want to just get like one quick glance. That's not going to give you a true representation of what is potentially going on there. Okay. Now, there are some ethical issues that could arise, and some examples of that your book talks about is um, maintaining confidentiality. Okay, so that's important. You're collaborating with participants. We want to maintain our ethics there. Um, refrain from deceptive practices. You're informing participants of the purpose. So, those are just some of the things that you have to make sure you're not going to breach. So yeah, so that's pretty much chapter 7. It's just a quick overview of different ways you collect data for your qualitative study. And then next, you're going to go into read chapter 8, and then we'll be able to learn and discuss how you analyze this data. So now that you've got this data, what do you do with it? So that's what we're going to address with chapter 8 this week. Thank you all so much. God bless.